And we're live. Okay. This episode is titled For the Love of Film. And this is kind of interesting because I have my buddy Mike, who's, I think this might be the only time I've had someone on who I am friends with IRL. That's in real life for you boomers out there. Anyway, Mike is a buddy I've known for, I don't know, about 15 years, and he knows more about film than anyone else I know. And I have a fairly large acquaintanceship, so that's saying a lot. This guy knows film, and not just film. What's kind of interesting about Mike is he knows so much about the inner workings of Hollywood. Like he'll know, sometimes he even knows like the political motivations of like studio execs and things like that. And we're kind of gonna get into that. I'm gonna pick his brain a little bit, and he's going to um he's going to give us his insights. He'll, say what he wants. Mike, why don't you, without giving away your details, because it's dangerous to be associated with me. Oh, the safety doc is here. Hey, holy crap! How you doing, brother? Um, the safety doc, the author of school safety. Yes, brilliant guy. Hope you like film, the safety doc. That's Dr. Perodin. Anyway, Mike, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? You could say as little or as much as you want, regarding film. And don't give away any personal details if you don't want to.
As I've said to my friend here, uh, I watch an unhealthy amount of media. Um, I think at one point a couple years ago, I clocked in 850 movies inside a calendar year. And that's not counting TV shows and books and all that stuff. That's just pure movie absorption. And I know I have a problem, but there is no AA for movie addicts.
And I think it's fair to say that, I mean, actually, it doesn't. Full disclosure, Mike has a job, a very important job in the tech sector. I won't say what it is, and he's a totally highly functioning person. So it's just that he does have this sincere love of film, cinema, or he called it media, but it's mostly film. But let me ask you this, Mike, and we've known each other a long time, but I don't think I've ever asked you this question. What is it about film that you love so much?
Well, honestly, it was growing up, growing up, I consumed books. I was an avid book reader, 3, 4 books a week during the school year. I made those stupid summer reading lists in like a week. Consumed books. But as I got older and jobs took over and things like that, I found less time to just sit in the corner and read. So I started consuming them over the only other medium available to me, which is cinema. A couple hours at a shot. I can consume that. I consume that media and move on. And I've been lucky enough to have jobs that were flexible enough for me to consume even more media while I'm working.
Yeah. So, in other words, when COVID happened, Mike really went over the cliff. Let's say.
COVID was a hermit's wet dream. Let's be honest. I didn't have to leave my house. Score.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, so what age did you kind of make the transition? Can I? I'll delete it after, but you were in the military. We can just say that, right?
Yeah.
Was your was I'm not saying what branch. Were you? Did the love of film happen before or after your service?
Uh, while I watched a lot of film before and during the service, I mean, I had one of those bootleg, I consumed VHS tapes by the ton, and just had to like HBO and Showtime, you know,
You're dating
recording while
yourself,
I
Michael.
was.
You're dating yourself.
Yeah, I know. I was the guy who programmed your VCR for your grandparents.
How to get that 12 to stop flashing? Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. But I was able to record HBO and Showtime and Cinemax while I was deployed. And I would just come home and watch whatever was recorded while I was gone. So
Mm.
I consumed a lot there. But honestly, I went from books to anime, Japanese animation in all its forms, and into movies. And I'm actually slowly going back into the Japanese animation media, but that's probably a different topic.
Well, only because I don't know enough about it to ask intelligent questions. So if it's
Yeah,
okay with you, we won't touch on that too much, just because,
that's fair. That's
yeah,
fair.
you know me personally that I just don't know enough about it. Um,
But honestly, my love in cinema was, there was, I got, I got to live through. This is what Scorsese made Scorsese great. This is what made Brian De Palma great. This is what made Kara Kurosawa great. So I consumed all of that, and just this is what makes film film. And my love just glommed onto the fact this is what cinema done right looks like.
mm. And it's funny because we've had so many discussions one on one, just like hanging out, critiquing film, and we've had our disagreements. The big one I think we almost came to blows was over the Irishman, right? Didn't I take a couple swings at you and you ducked because you were defending them?
Well, I, the we didn't really have a disagreement over the Irishman. It's just I understood the motivations behind the film and therefore liked it better. And yeah, and you watched it and understandably saw a 70-year-old man in CGI looking like he's 30, kicking someone like he's a 70-year-old.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that takes you out of the film. And to be perfectly honest, that's a fair assessment. That took me out of the film too. What I was The reason why I gave it the a slightly higher mark was look at what we can do to de-age people today.
yeah. No,
Well,
I mean, from a
technic,
technically, it was.
technically, it's a wonder of a film. Story-wise, it's a little, it's sort of like the discussions I have with people over James Cameron's Avatar film. It's
Mm,
beautiful, but it lacks a story.
right. And yeah, I think, I mean, not I don't want to like make this about the Irishman, but one of the things I had brought up to you when we discussed the film in depth was I hated that weird subplot at the end about his daughter. I thought that totally came out of left field.
That was for I want to say that was for Scorsese's kid, but I remember there was a reason why he tacked that on at the end. Other than to make it a 3-hour film.
Well, I think it was like 3.5. It was obscene how long it was.
Yeah, it was an obscene film. I you know, uh, sometimes I agree with Harvey Weinstein made a mint on, if you cut 20 minutes of this film, I can sell it to the US audience. And he would say that to every person who made a foreign film. You cut 20 minutes, I can sell it to the US audience. And there is some truth to that. But where Harvey made a mistake was he always cut out the wrong 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's a big mistake. Very big mistake. Um,
Exactly.
and one of the things I found interesting about you whenever we discuss film is like you would always know like a lot of the backstory behind like why a movie was made this way, or took this narrative or something like that. I don't know if you want to talk about it. If you don't, we don't have to. But I can't remember her name. She was one of the executives. Was it who's the company that owns the rights to Star Wars now?
Oh, Kathleen fucking Kennedy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Hey. It's PG-13.
Sorry. Can I swear on this?
You can. I'm teasing. It's all right. I'm not monetized. Could you, for people who don't know, could you give like a 2-minute?
So okay, I will give you the 5 million foot view. There are YouTube channels that go into this story ad infinitum if you really care. But the high level is Kathleen Kennedy was Steven Spielberg's producer for the 80s. The highlight of Spielberg's career, Kathleen Kennedy was a producer of his films. And George Lucas hired her on to help produce his films, which include the Star Wars prequels. So when George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney, he got to name who was in charge of Lucasfilm at Disney, and that was Kathleen Kennedy.
And what do we, actually? I'm going to be right back. I'll be gone for 30 seconds because I got to drain the main vein. But for 30 seconds, can you kind of?
I can continue on.
Yeah, about Kathleen Kennedy and like what? I mean, I don't know. You don't know this because I mean, you never met her or interviewed her, but like just from kind of like from third-party sources, like why did she make the Star Wars movies the way she did? Just talk about
So I'll speak on this while you go, but
okay.
I don't really know the answer when she made her turn, or if that's always been her agenda. But ever since the Star Wars prequels were greenlit at Disney in, I want to say 2014, she was one of the key decision makers that basically said, hey, we're going to throw out everything you know about Star Wars that has seen the written word, and we're only going to treat the Star Wars prequels and the Star Wars main trilogy as canon. And we'll do the Cartoon Network series 2 just in case, because we might want to mine them later. But she got it in her head that the fans of Star Wars were not going to be their bread and butter. She needed to court a new audience. And she courted an audience that was not, they were not fans. They were socialites, they were social media warriors. She even made up shirts for her and her posse. It says the future is female. And that just, that just permeated into the writing of everything that has happened in the Disney sequels. You can even see it where even Rogue One was headed for a Reservoir Dogs type ending. When they basically fired the director and reshot the entire third act for a lot of money because they didn't want the ending to be so bleak.
And how do you like for people, let's say, there's a lot of, to be honest, most people listen to this are younger. How do I ask this question? What is the best way for them to kind of get in touch with the background of what goes into making a film and stuff like that? I mean, obviously we're not in the days of reading, trade magazines and stuff like that. What resources do you use to know as much as you do about film?
Well, for me personally, I learned a lot about film by watching film. And it was through happenstance back in the 90s when I got in an argument with someone that Scorsese didn't. Um, it was an argument about Martin Scorsese that I started actually looking at the zines at the time. There's like Fangoria
Yeah, I
magazine
remember
and
that. Yeah.
all of these magazines that were like insightful to Hollywood. Because I honestly didn't pay attention to what films were coming out the following year.
Hmm.
I just saw whatever was at the cinema, and I just, I if I had time, I would spend a couple hours at the cinema watching whatever was there. Um, but it was only when I got in an argument about Martin Scorsese films I even started investigating. So it was the mid '90s. I had a tech job, I had money, so I could actually spend some time and research stuff.
And by the
And
way, guys, this is before there was Google. So when he says research stuff, he means he actually had to do work.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Lycos wasn't even that good at that time. Uh, yes, I'm dating myself.
Yes.
We're talking AOL, Lycos. Come on.
Dial up. Yeah, where the modems made that horrible sound. Yeah.
Yeah, log into AOL, go grab a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Um, so, yes, I got into the fanzines, and even on AOL were the budding of early websites. I'm trying to, I have to go back into the Wayback Machine, but there was actually Ain't It Cool News was one of the first websites I remember uh, catching on to in the 90s. I
Did that
honestly couldn't tell
predate?
you
Because
when.
we had this conversation about IMDb as being one of the first websites.
IMDb, well, I don't know if IMDb was one of the first websites, but I know it was the first acquisition Amazon made.
Yeah. And they totally effed it up, but that's a separate
Yeah,
topic.
but that's neither here nor there. But I remember the early days of Ain't It Cool News. I mean, they got early access to film. They had really nice analysis that that would give Siskel and Ebert a run for their money.
Hmm.
And this was when Siskel and Ebert was like, you had to watch it because there was no replay of Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah. I remember. I used to watch that. I think it came out. It was late. I remember this back when I was a kid in New York watching that show. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to catch that live because that wasn't on demand anywhere. You
Right.
know, so so the advent of
So to all you
websites.
Zoomers out there, we Gen Xers had it rough. So you know.
Yeah, we actually had to work for our information.
Yes, you really did. And well, that's another thing though. Like now we're in the point of information overload. By that I mean there's so much of it out there, you don't know what's BS and what's real.
Yeah, I mean, someone 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 fed me a line that made absolutely perfect sense at the time, and I can't remember it to save my life, but it has to do with analysis paralysis. There's
Mm.
too much information. How do you decide which ones to what what to take as gospel and what to throw out? Because there's so much coming at you, to the point where it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if someone says something to you loud enough and long enough, you're just going to start listening to that voice, much to everyone's detriment.
Well, that's kind of reminding me of something. Like we had a discussion about how Harvey Weinstein uh, how do I say how Harvey Weinstein started the I don't know if the word is like the PR.
He flat out started buying Golden Globe
Yeah,
awards.
can you like okay, you got to speak to people like they're novices, because Mike, people don't know as much stuff about film.
Okay, so back in the
Dumb it down.
Yeah, back in the 1990s, Harvey Weinstein was the CEO of Weinstein Pictures. They basically made their money by buying indie movies and foreign films at low prices, cutting them, trimming them to U.S. tastes, and then putting them in the marketplace, making a mint. You buy a Korean film for $1 million, make 50 million at the box office, you've made 40 million in profit.
And you're really not really even doing any work, right? You just
absolutely
buying it, repackaging, and selling. Right? I mean,
yeah.
Am I wrong? I mean, tell me, is that basically?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're repackaging a film, throwing a little marketing behind it, and rolling in the dough.
Oh wow!
He got so good at that he amassed a bankroll fairly quickly. And what he started doing was seeing if he could figure out how to get some of those pictures that they were rolling out, a lot of which were really good films. Don't get me wrong. I liked a lot of what Weinstein put out. Not Harvey Weinstein, Weinstein Productions.
Right. We got to be clear about this, but yeah, okay.
I don't want to be canceled. I liked a lot of what Weinstein Productions put out in the marketplace. But what really turned me off was when suddenly full-page ads started showing up in newspapers right around the award season time, which is between November and March is when award season actually ends. It starts with all these little podunk indie spirit awards, District Directors Guild Producer Awards, and ends with the granddaddy of them all, which is the Oscars. Now, you can't really do anything about the smaller awards because they're niche markets, or you have to be a director, or you have to be a producer, or you have to know somebody to get an award. But Golden Globes, all you have to do is put on a spirited marketing campaign. And so Weinstein started putting out full-page ads and trade magazines like Variety and The Hollywood Reporter and things like that would influence voters to vote for their films for Golden Globes.
And the Golden Globes is like, I don't know if this is still true, but it was I'd almost want to say it was a precursor to making an Oscar, at least a nomination, right?
But it was kind of the hype show to the Oscars. If you did well at the Golden Globes, you had good momentum going into the Oscars.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily mean you won. It just your chances increased. You became you went from a 6-5 favorite to a 2-1 favorite. It really enhanced your stature. And when those 90-year-old MPAA people sat down in the theater to watch your movie, if they didn't fall asleep, they probably voted for you because they remember the Golden Globes were good. I'm being facetious,
but probably not far from the truth.
Yeah, I'm sure it happened like that at some point in history, but but because of that, there was when it happened for first couple of years, it was kind of like, wow, Weinstein kind of that's they put on a spirited marketing campaign, good for them to try and eke out a win. But when they started winning year after year after year after year, people started going to Weinstein for how to take my movie, and I think that's where a lot of the shenanigans that eventually got him into trouble kind of took place.
Okay, we won't, because that we could go down that crazy rabbit hole of the whole,
and it's all hearsay.
Yeah, but as far as just the politics of film is, would you say it's fair to say that now that he did this another producers saw the success of it, this has kind of become standard practice now with the movie, with the industry. The whole promoting it, like, it's, in other words, films are not necessarily based on how great they are when it comes to an Academy Award. And we'll get into the Academy Awards now because I know you have some strong issues with the way they changed the rules. But the idea of it's more about who's getting the most press rather than what is the best film.
Well, and the Oscars were kind of immune to that for decades. The stereotype of the MPA voter being a septuagenarian is probably not far off throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. Where the problems started taking place was, you remember Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers came out.
That was the second one, right?
Yeah, this is the second one.
That was the one I liked. I know this is an unpopular opinion because most people like the first and the third one, but I preferred that one because I love the battle scene. But anyway, keep going.
So, well, when Fellowship of the Ring came out, critics and audiences alike were like, yeah, that should win Picture of the Year. It wasn't even on the Oscars shortlist for Best Film.
Okay, now explain that. Why? Well, what happened? Just give us the insight.
Well, it's a genre film. I mean, no matter how much you and I and everyone else love Lord of the Rings, it's a genre film. It's a fantasy film. And it's very, very hard for a genre film, be it horror or science fiction and fantasy, to break into that Best Picture category. And so I forget what the 5 films are. I could probably look it up on Wikipedia. But basically, Lord of the Rings wasn't even, Fellowship of the Ring wasn't even on the docket to be Best Film.
Oh, it wasn't even nominated.
It wasn't even nominated. It was nominated for a whole host of other things.
Yeah, like special effects or best adapted screenplay. But as far as Best Picture or anything, no.
Yeah. They're like, why isn't this on the Best Picture thing? And so, the crack in the armor happened when The Two Towers was nominated and won.
Oh, The Two Towers won. I didn't know that.
I think it was The Two Towers that won. Let me look
that up because I'm curious now. We don't want to give our listeners false information here because this is I got what's left of my reputation to actually protect. But I don't. You might be wrong on that. I mean, I'm dangerous like when I accuse Mike of being wrong about anything about film because I always end up being the person that's wrong. But he'll find out in about 10 seconds.
There we go. 2002. Stars. So you're right. It didn't win Best Picture.
I was okay.
No, it was nominated. It was nominated for Best Picture.
It was nominated. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
so it was
I thought it won for some reason, but it was nominated. But Fellowship, I don't think was.
And you probably, like most people, I think you believe that Fellowship is a superior film.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the consensus of most people.
It was nominated. I thought it wasn't nominated, but it was one of those things. Is like, why aren't genre pictures making? Everyone was pulling for Lord of the Rings. I mean, it was the best thing on the silver screen for those particular years. It won the BAFTAs. I think it won the Golden Globes. Won a few Golden Globes here and there. So it was like it had the Oscar push.
Mm-hmm.
And
but the how do I say this? There's what the peasants want to win it, and then there's what the establishment wants to win it. Do you believe that's true?
Uh, yeah, the hoi polloi, yes. Um, yeah, and I think it all Return of the King is the one that won. Uh, and Return of the King was kind of like, honestly, the worst of the lot.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was. In fairness to what was his name? What was the director?
Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson. In fairness to him, that was if you've read the books, that was so hard to make into a movie.
Oh no, he had a gargantuan task,
Yeah,
and even I want to say Tolkien's son, Christopher. I think it's Christopher Tolkien.
yeah,
Did not like his rendition of it.
yeah. Actually a lot of purists who read the novels had a lot of challenges with the third film. And
Yeah, well, yeah, they wanted to hear people try to sing Elvish on screen.
right,
Uh,
which would have been interesting, whatever.
exactly.
But
Or was it Tom Bombadil? I think that was a campaign too. Where is Tom?
right, so yeah, there was a lot, but I think that it was amazing what he did, especially, looking back, we're so used to, do we still call it CGI now, or no, I don't even know what, but I mean, a lot of people don't realize how long ago that film was made. So, what was actually, we were watching, what was it? We were watching a movie, a few years ago. We were watching the movie Zulu, 1964, with Michael Caine, and I can't remember the other guy. And it was, the special effects were so cheesy, but the movie was made in 1964. So you have to take that, you have to always take a film in the context of the technology that existed when it was made, and still appreciate that. Like, do you agree?
Well, yes and no. I know several people that absolutely refuse to watch films that are older than they are, simply because it doesn't look real enough. Like, well, yeah, before special effects, before CGI, nothing was real. I mean, those were all practical effects or whatever in camera. So they want they absolutely. Ooh, Peter Jackson's Fight Club. Honestly, Peter Jackson, I don't think as much is not much into head games, because that Fight Club was pretty much a head game. But I could go with Underground Boxing Hobbits.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, we don't want to hear about your sexual fetishes, but anyway, keep going.
But no, yes, I actually, there are movies in my collection where it's, I don't like romantic comedies, but there are 1950s romantic comedies and things like that I appreciate, because they were trying something new in the 50s that is now just a trope of rom-coms today.
Right. Like, yeah. So a lot of rom-coms you see now, if you are ignorant of, as you said, films that happened before you were born, you're thinking, oh, how innovative was this? And you're like, no, that was done in like 15 movies, before you were born.
Yeah, the first science fiction movie is, The Man in the Moon, is a 1926 short silent film.
Oh, is that the one where the rocket crashes into the moon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the most famous movie from that period is Metropolis, which, to the average moviegoer today is a 2.5 hour snooze fest.
Yeah, that was this high tech. You can just put that on YouTube, and you'll there's clips of it. People can see it if they're Metropolis. It was kind of really cool. It was 1930s.
1928,
Oh, was it
I believe.
Was it? All right, I thought it was the 30s, but all right. Well, I'm not going to argue with you. Movies back.
1927. I was a year off.
1920. Oh wow, was that old? Wow, it was pretty impressive for its time. My God.
Yeah.
That was yeah. There were a lot of that transition between silent film and talkies, as I believe that was the word that they used at the time. There was a huge amount of innovation that was going on. A lot of people don't know this, so and this is just my understanding. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when people used to go to see films during the silent era, they would actually have an orchestra in the theater playing music.
Either an orchestra or the school music teacher would be doing the piano.
Yeah, so there was sound. It wasn't like it was all dead silence. Like, and of course the music just wasn't playing white noise. They were playing music that was.
Yeah, there was sheet music that accompanied the music, accompanied the movie from theater to theater.
Right. So yeah, exactly. Actually, there was this weird anecdote you told me, and you're gonna have my memory is really foggy about this. Back in the days of celluloid, they would have a print of the movie, and they would have to deliver it like from theater to theater. And I'm trying to remember the story you told me about, like someone stealing the film or something, or.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly which story we were talking about, but I do know that in the old days, they only made, we'll just say, 100 copies of a movie because film was expensive. So what they would do is they wouldn't. There isn't a thing like it is today. We're going to release it into 4,000 theaters nationwide. We're going to release in California this week. And then 2 weeks later, we're going to pick up those film canisters and we're going to deliver them to Oregon. We're going to deliver some to Arizona. And if we're lucky, by the end of the year, they'll be in New York.
Right. Well, in fairness, they probably flew them to New York and LA, and it was all the other like middle America places that.
Yeah. Usually they put them on as like, hey, since you're taking goods and services to St. Louis, can you take this box of film with you?
Yeah.
Things like that. I'm sure those type of deals work themselves out, but along the way, accidents happened, thievery was rampant, films would just disappear.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there is a huge amount of celluloid that's simply been lost to time.
Yeah, there are even stories today of people going into their grandparents' attic and finding old celluloid that they have to bring in the hazmat team to deal with because silver nitrate is explosive.
I didn't know that. Oh, shit.
Well, that's what happened to a lot of these other. Well, a lot of film. The reason why we don't have a lot of film before the 1930s is because it was all on silver nitrate, and you breathe wrong and it catches on fire.
Okay, it was extremely volatile. All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
No, but there is a question. I very much disagree with you on this. And you told me one of your favorite films of all time. And when you told me this, it's like it almost ended our friendship. You told me that you loved the 2016 reboot of Ghostbusters. Now, could you explain why you love that film so much?
In what universe and how high was I?
I was being facetious, Michael. To this day, I've never seen that film, and I have a good buddy of mine named Chris who loved the original Ghostbusters. It's his favorite film of all time, and it literally came out before he was born. And he always felt that movie was a personal affront to everything that was good about movies. I was wondering.
I would agree with that sentiment. I mean, on paper, Paul Feig is a good director. If just a little bit on the, I like women more than men spectrum.
Well, so do I. But
No. He believes in female leads. He will
Ah,
never make a male the lead of his films. They're
okay.
like, okay, fine, fair enough. That's your niche. Go for it. I mean,
Well,
he
if
does.
he's using like Meryl Streep in all his movies, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it. But anyway,
No. No, Paul Feig has made some good movies. I just say that his predilection to only having female leads kind of I
it's
puts him in
limiting.
a niche for me.
Yeah, it's extremely limiting. Yeah, yeah.
Melissa McCarthy, with the right material, is a funny actress. Kristen Wiig, with the right material, is a funny actress. Kate McKinnon, SNL Gold, one of the few highlights from the 2000 to 2020 era of SNL. So and the less said about the fourth one, the better. But they're funny. These are on paper. It's like we're going to get these four funny people, and Paul Feig is going to direct them in a Ghostbusters film, and you're like, it could work if the story is there,
Well,
but the
in full
story
disclosure,
wasn't there.
okay, so that's what I was going to get to. In full disclosure, I'd never seen the film. So you're saying what really killed the film was just the script?
So what killed the film was he knowing Paul Feig, he had an opportunity to flip the comedy script on its head. You know, um, you know, Leslie Jones is the fourth one I couldn't remember a minute ago. He could have made Leslie Jones the Egon of the group.
Mm.
The smart person. He could have had Kirsten Wiig be the Bill Murray of the group. He could have flipped comedy script on its head and goes, you know, uh, I know Leslie Jones. She looks like that blue collar worker, so we're going to put her in the workman row, and it would have been funny as hell if they made her the Egon character. It would have flipped the script. He had opportunities. He didn't take he didn't take comedy chances. He just said, I'm going to shoot my film and then I'm going to abuse the audience until they like the film.
Mm.
Because they went on a massive you just don't like women leading your films route to marketing.
And it was more, the truth was, no, we just don't like bad movies.
Yeah, we don't like bad movies. When you have Bill Murray is saying, look, I'll be in your movie, but I have to die in the first 20 minutes.
I think you told this little bit of backstory to that, right? Like,
yeah, he did not want Sony dug out the contracts and they said, this is the third Ghostbusters film. You will be in it, by God. And he said, fine. I must die in the first 20 minutes before the first reel is done.
Yeah, if I want to die in the first 30 seconds, probably want to die in the opening credits. But yeah, I mean,
I was like, okay, when you have a comedy icon basically telling you, don't really want to be here.
Maybe you should listen to him. I think Bill Murray knows more about humor than most anybody else.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to touch on because I don't have you all night, but another thing I want to touch on is, as you know from our conversations we've had one-on-one, is my big thing is casting. And it's less so for you. You were more forgiving about who is cast in a role that, I don't want to speak for you. You'll get a chance to respond. From our conversations, would you say that you were more forgiving about the casting and more about the script? Is that fair or not fair?
So I do care about casting, but you're right. It's not as high a priority to me as the story. But I can name sometimes. There was a film I watched at a film festival a few years back where it was a film noir story. The story was actually good. The direction was actually on point. I even had a conversation with the director after the film about it. I liked what
Oh
this
yeah,
guy
time
was
out for a
putting
second.
down.
Time out. Just so you know, Mike is such a film aficionado. He gets to go to the film festivals, and he actually has had many one-on-ones with directors, producers, and actors of films. Please continue, Michael.
But the one thing that really disappointed me about this particular movie were the romantic leads had no on-screen chemistry. And I pointed it out to the director, and he was like, he didn't really know what to say, and then he said they're married.
Oh, I think we had this conversation. Yeah, you just thought because they were married that the chemistry would translate to the film, and it
Yeah,
didn't.
you would think, it's like, the director was like, they're married. And it's like, it certainly didn't look like it on camera.
Yeah, but they filed for divorce last week. Yeah, that's kind of yeah. Um, no, actually, I've heard that. I remember reading a review years and years ago. There was a movie called Proof of Life with what's the guy's name from Gladiator? Um,
Uh, uh,
Russell Crowe
Russell Crowe, yeah.
and Meg Ryan, and I think it came out like circa 2000, 2001. And they apparently like Meg Ryan. Russell Crowe was single at the time, but I think Meg Ryan had been in like living with the guy for like years or something like that, and they started an affair during the movie. And one of the critiques I read from a critic was saying that despite the fact that they were having this IRL romance in real life, that the chemistry didn't translate to screen. Like you weren't getting that vibe, like for whatever. And I don't know if that's the fault of the directors or perhaps because the affair was perhaps covert, that the both the actor and the actress were holding back. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw the film. Well, of course you've seen it, Proof of Life.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I think there might actually be something to not having married people on screen together because, uh, um, oh, there was a movie. Not there was a movie last year that, not last year, but just before COVID hit. There was a romantic comedy. It was basically about how a man and his wife met each other,
okay.
and his the guy's wife was actually an actress, but they realized that they didn't have actual on-screen chemistry. So they hired so they had so they hired an actress to play to play the romantic lead, because the guy and his wife simply didn't the chemistry didn't show up on camera,
It didn't translate.
didn't translate to camera.
Right.
And there might be something to that. You want to hide a piece of yourself from the camera, and that is a very private piece.
Yeah, that is interesting though. That because you would think like I mean human nature just says oh yeah that's it, but a lot of people are like no, because like the way the character he is playing, like let's say like the wife, let's say it's a husband and wife, they'd be like the character he's playing is not the man I married. So you know what I mean, like that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and vice versa. The woman.
Yeah, getting up the emotions for particular beats. You don't want to get angry at a person when you don't really have a reason to, or if you have a reason to be angry at him, you have to suddenly love him on camera. That might not translate too well that day.
Right, yeah. Um,
Uh,
well, can I ask you this? And this is like a tough question because it's like, well, it's kind of an impossible question, but especially for someone like you who's seen so many films, could you give us, well, I'm not going to say your top 5 favorite movies of all time, but let's put it this way: if you had to pick if anybody who's interested in cinema or the love of cinema, top films, whatever number there should be, you can list them. There could be 5, it could be 10, that everybody should see. What would you
Uh,
say?
well, hard task. And I think we discussed this before. I someone actually asked me this like 10 years ago, and I froze because it depends on the mood. Am I in the mood for a comedy? Am I in the mood for a romantic movie? Am I in the mood for sci-fi? Whatever. But there's, you know, genre defining films that I liked.
Well, can I stop you here? Do you remember we had a discussion about which Batman movie was Heath Ledger in?
The Dark Knight.
Dark Knight. Yeah, we were because you were talking because you always talk about because it's just your nature to dissect films so much because you know so much about them is you classify them in genres and everything like that. And you send me the emails of your lists. You do this all the time. Your yearly thing, and you break everything down. But I said there are films that transcend genre. Like it doesn't matter what genre they're in, that they transcend it. Like because Batman was a superhero movie.
Yes.
But, I mean, The Dark Knight was a superhero movie, but it transcended the genre. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Absolutely. But when I'm thinking of, do I like things like, Star Wars: A New Hope? That's not really, that's one of my favorite films, but it's, is it's a film almost everyone has seen. Heat is good for about 2 hours and then falls apart. And don't at me. I honestly, Heat's greatest thing is the build up between the two leads meeting one another than the actual meetup.
Yeah.
But it's like Lawrence of Arabia. Yes, it transcends.
Oh, great fucking movie, man. That's
yeah,
one of my
it's like yes, Lawrence of Arabia is in my top probably 10. Godfather is probably in my top 10. But those are very dense, hard to grasp movies unless you love cinema or you love the art of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas films like
in fairness, though, Michael, to truly love cinema, you have to love or appreciate the art of storytelling, and that's what I always. I think it was Roger Ebert. He said, "What is a movie?" And he said, "It is a mood-altering device." Now, I don't know if you agree with that or don't, but I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Well, I think the best movies follow the not the televangel, but an evangelical preacher approach.
Oh, Jesus.
Where I'm telling you a story and I'm winding you up and I'm building the tension and I'm building to a crescendo, and then I'm giving you the cathartic drop. Which is that you know uh, the person beat the obstacle and made it to the finish line in sports movies, or the last girl, the final girl survives the horror picture. Those are the crescendo type movies. But movies like Godfather can be dense for a first timer. It's definitely not one you'd say, oh, you like cinema? You think you like cinema? I'm going to drop you in front of Godfather. It's what do you like about cinema? And then when they've met the milestones of, I know what a rom-com is. I know the difference between action and thriller. I know the difference between comedy and dramedy, things like that. And then you go, okay.
So you're saying like you don't put a first grader in like a PhD class?
Correct.
Right.
There's reason why Disney movies exist. They're great gateways into better cinema. That's not to look down at Disney movies per se. It's the audience they cultivated is a younger audience, to explore themes. And then as you get older, you kind of age out of Disney movies.
Mm.
Of course, when you have kids, you're dragged kicking and screaming back into Disney films, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
But no, there's a reason why you build up to the greats. I mean, it's one thing to say 2001 is a tour de force, or Blade Runner is a thinker's film, things like that. But you don't park people who've never seen film enough to appreciate it.
Right, because so much of what makes those films iconic is going to go right over your head.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, Alien, that was a transcendent movie, and it wasn't until decades later that I found out what led up to the making of Alien, and it just makes that movie so much cooler.
You want to give us the Cliff Notes?
So the Cliff Notes is watch a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune. There's a Spanish director that got the rights to film Dune in the early 1970s, but didn't make it. But he brought together a crew of artists and writers that eventually made their way into significant sci-fi films of the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
So he built up a team that eventually transformed sci-fi cinema.
And Alien was 1979, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. So we could have had a Dune movie in 1974 or 5 if he got the funding.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a whole other thing. Like, one thing I just want to touch on briefly because we could go down a rabbit hole, and this was the politics in movies now. Like, I don't want to get, because this episode with you is not political, but the Oscars, I know you used to, at least at one time in your life, I'm not sure when, you used to hold those with great respect, or at least a modicum of respect, and now you don't. Could you explain why?
So, without too much in the way of timeline, but it for the longest time, movies that made it into the best film category, I really, the best actor, actress, supporting actor, actress, those are good table arguments to have. I can go through the last 20 years and I can list 10 to 15 actors and actresses in each category that deserve to win the award.
And didn't, you mean they deserved
yeah,
it,
and didn't.
Yeah.
But the person who eventually won was in my list. One of these people is going to win the award. But in the best film category, I found myself at odds with Hollywood a lot of the time because the best film was not from the U.S. in a lot of cases.
Isn't there a best foreign film?
Well, there is a best foreign film category, but that kind of puts foreign films in a niche. It's the best film of Romania is going against the best film from the Netherlands is going against the best film from the Sudan. It's when you have years where the best I went for a decade where the top 8 slots of my best stuff for the year were from foreign countries. The top Hollywood film was maybe number 6.
Okay.
And more often than not, what I thought was the best film in the U.S. wasn't even in the short list for best film that year.
And when did this divergence, for lack of a better word, start? Like,
I would say the mid 2010s.
Okay.
Uh, uh, YouTube, uh, YouTube taking audience away from the cinema, the rise of social media driving people who would otherwise see a film away from theater. Uh, yeah, who would have thought? All movies are political. You just have to get that through your head. All movies are political. Doesn't matter if the Daily Beast is making a movie, or if it's your 15-year-old neighbor with a film camera. They're all political in some way, shape, or form. Um, but where things got testy was um, 2018's Oscars So White campaign. You know,
Wait. So, Oscars what?
Oscars So White, where I think of uh, the four main categories: best actor, actress, supporting actor, and actress. There was one person of color in the nomination pool. And all of the top movies were all
I mean, was this like by law, or is this just like?
that that that's the way it's been for decades. Is the best films are presented to America, or presented to America. These are who we think are the top five films of the year, or these are the best five acting performances from an actress. Best supporting. These are your top five. And there was a campaign that was like, well, yeah, there's only one person of color, and it's not. There isn't an Asian person. There isn't a Latino person. It was obviously
My
in
my my
some
oh
group.
my it's Latinx, please.
I'm sorry, but Latinx sounds like I'm going to a Brazilian porn site.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
In the wake of that, the MPAA says we're going to expand our uh, membership to 1,000 persons of color in order to increase diversity. While I, on the whole, agree with expanding the membership beyond the septuagenarians that have uh, been on the MPAA dais for decades, it seemed to be a very targeted, selective. We are going to increase to one community.
Mm, okay.
You don't see, when Crazy Rich Asians came out a couple years ago, it was the first time Hollywood put together an all Asian movie, behind the camera and in front of the camera. It's the first time something like that ever happened in Hollywood. Happens all the time in China and Japan and India and all these
Korea.
other places, but it's the first time Hollywood spent 60-70 million dollars on a film, and it was an all Asian production.
Okay. Well, I'm ashamed to say I never saw it. I mean, was it any good? I don't know.
Surprisingly good.
Okay.
It is a romantic comedy, which I absolutely hate. But I actually enjoyed the hell out of Crazy Rich Asians.
Okay. So, I mean, so your problem is not like you don't give a fuck like a person of color or whatever is the. I'm not sure if that's even politically incorrect to say.
I don't care who's in a film as much as I care what the story is told. If this, case in point, there was a film that came out a few years ago called Tangerine. Let me pull it up really quick.
Was this like a big budget movie, or was this like a...
No. Tangerine was made by Sean Baker. It was filmed on, I want to say, an iPhone 6 or 4.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, it was filmed on a phone. It was one of the first films that was shot using a phone camera. And I could be wrong on that. Don't
Yeah, it's okay.
But it was ultra low budget. but it's basically,
Yeah.
it's basically about a hooker looking for a pimp on Christmas Eve. Okay,
Okay.
the lead actor is trans. I didn't care about that. I thought that just added to the ambiance of the film. But the story told was actually kind of fascinating. If it's obvious they weren't all good actors because the guy just pulled out a camera and followed some people
Well, yeah,
around
you
the
couldn't have a
streets of
second
LA.
camera. Like you couldn't have a second camera for the reaction shots. Like for people who don't know, you can look it up. Like there's a something that happens and there's a separate camera for the reaction shots. They have to do a double take. Anyway, that's all the inside baseball stuff. But if you're filming everything on a one camera, whether it's an iPhone or a handheld, that there's all these limitations that you have.
Yeah,
But
but it's like the plot had me. It's like a hooker tears through Tinseltown on Christmas Eve searching for her pimp. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it, and I was thoroughly fascinated for 90 minutes. It didn't matter to me that it was a trans hooker. That didn't matter to me. It was a good story and it entertained me.
Right. It was so. I think what you're trying to say is that having these requirements before you can even be considered for an award is well, maybe
to me, story comes first. If diversity happens, more's the better.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that diversity in film is great, but not at the cost of doing
at the cost of, well, you're a white man. What do you know about a Latino's plight? So you can't write that story. Only a Latino person who has been taken into America by a coyote can write a story.
Yeah, that kind of
that's called that's called life experience.
Yeah.
That's like saying a New York reporter can't report on something because he's not an athletic person or he's not a politician. A reporter is going to get information and write a story.
If they did that to sports writers, could you imagine? Because I don't know if you ever noticed, like sports writers, or at least in the old days, were like the actual guys that used to write the columns. I grew up like really dating myself, the New York Post, the most out of shape motherfuckers like chain smokers and stuff writing on sports. Yeah. If you said that these guys couldn't write, and they were great writers, but if you said, "Oh no, you never played sports or were any good at it, how can you write about it?" Well, come on. I mean, do you really want Mike Tyson writing? I mean, all due respect to Mike Tyson, do you really want him writing articles on boxing?
No, and it's not just, I want his insight, but I don't want him writing a story about it because he's too far in.
His forte is actually being a boxer, not being a writer.
Exactly. He's too far in the weeds to write something compelling.
And so, well, let me ask you this. This is kind of, and I know this might be hard to answer. How do you see films going? Like, where do you see films in 5 years from now?
So this is hotly debated on lots of YouTube channels. We see signs of change. We're just hoping they stick. And you and I have had discussions about, things just aren't playing out. And I don't think they're, it's like the winds of change are there, but it's going to take us a long time and a lot of pain to get there. There are people in charge of companies that are realizing that which films have I watched the most? Honestly, I think I've watched 80s action films the most.
I did not know that about you, brother. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Um,
But you were talking about
yeah.
sorry, I
So
interrupted you.
no worries. There was a there was a momentum shift with post 2018, and I don't want to be political, but things like BLM and social
Yeah,
justice
chill
warriors
out,
and
guys.
everything else like that swung us so far to one direction where where it infiltrated the big companies to create films that abuse their audience. And we've seen in recent stock calls, the quarterly reports for some companies, where they're realizing that these movies that they've been playing to the quote unquote woke crowd ain't making money.
Mm.
You can't make money for the people in Hollywood. You have to make media, whether it's television, movies, whatever, that is going to get a guy in Lincoln, Nebraska to take his family to the movies. You have to make movies for those guys too. Now, you may want to drag him one direction or another. You do that through subtlety. Like the case in point, Star Trek, the original series, The
Which
Next
one?
Generation, they were wholly left leaning shows.
Yes.
But they presented both sides of the coin, and they kind of say, who do you agree with?
Well,
And
also, wouldn't you
there's,
say that it wasn't? I will grant you that perhaps they were both sides of the coin, but wouldn't you say that also that they were entertaining? Like,
yes,
even if
yeah,
you just show one side of the coin, but it's entertaining.
as Mary Poppins would say, a teaspoon of sugar helps medicine go down. You
Okay.
know,
Right.
you got to entertain me, and then when I'm going home from the cinema, digesting what I just watched, it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be an asshole to the donut maker. You know,
Right. So yeah, so I would say that first and foremost, cinema or any other as media, as you put it, should be entertaining. And I believe that rightly or wrongly, you can have a political agenda behind it. But as long as it's entertaining, I don't give a fuck.
yeah. Well, and that was largely a criticism for the Oscars for the last 20 years. Was it was increasingly insular to dramas that maybe 1% of filmmakers even attempted to watch, because the plot, or the movie. Most people want to go to the movie to be entertained. That's why Lord of the Rings was such a powerhouse.
Blockbuster.
It's why the Dark Knight, the Batman trilogy with Christian Bale, was such a powerhouse. It's like people want to be entertained first and foremost. Everything else is secondary.
Mm.
And if your marketing campaign is telling me that I need to see this movie because there is a half-second lesbian kiss somewhere in the movie and blink and you miss it, I'm going to have to look up what the Sarkeesian effect is real quick. Forgive me.
I think that's a Gamergate thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you don't have to talk about it, if you don't want to.
No, I'm not entirely sure what he was talking to, so I had to look it up. Is this about the male gaze and gaming crap? Uh, you know,
I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure. It was a thing back in the day about.
well, I understand, the the marketing of a lot of video games is towards males, so therefore they are going for what males like most. And yes, there is not a whole lot of female representation in games, much like there isn't female representation in STEM, and we should do what we can for that. However, go where your money is. You know, if the money, you go where the money is. We just saw it last weekend with the movie Bros. You make a movie for, it's one, a romantic comedy, so strike one, and two, it's for a gay audience. So not only are you looking for the rom com audience, you're looking for a gay subset of the rom com audience. And then when your movie only makes $4 million, you say, well, it's because cis white males didn't see the movie.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. They were saying that it was the lack of the success of the film was due to homophobia, which is not true. It's like you're splitting the target audience thinner and thinner and thinner, to the point where it's like slicing an onion, where you're getting down to the point where it's like you can see through it.
Well, and there's a YouTuber I listened to that broke it down. It's like, no, man, you released a romantic comedy the end of September, for crying out loud.
I don't know the.
He broke down the demographics. It's like one. He basically laid it out and said only 4 rom-coms in the last decade made more than $100 million, and one of them was Crazy Rich Asians, and only 16 made over $50 million. And you released a $20 million gay rom-com at the end of September with a marketing push that basically said straight people had their time.
Well, I think we're a dying breed, Mike. If you're straight.
I'm sorry. You're lucky you made $4 million.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was
and to be honest, the movie isn't that bad. It's a rom-com, so one strike against it. But the marketing did no service to the movie whatsoever. I mean, the market. If you walked in cold to the movie, you'd actually like it. But because of this marketing campaign that says, this movie ain't for straight white people, and then you don't see the film, and then they say, well, you straight white person, why didn't you see this movie? And I'm like, you told me not to.
Yeah, because you told me not to. Now I'm going to change channels here.
Sure.
I want to talk about streaming services, and this might be like almost financial advice, because I think you subscribe to some. I mean, I don't subscribe to, other than Amazon Prime, I don't subscribe to any. But there's a lot of things going on with the streaming services. Can you take a minute and kind of explain what they are and what's going on? I think there's kind of a corporate war going on.
Yeah, so there is a corporate war at a high level.
I'll be right back. Keep going.
Yeah, at a high level, you have the major dogs fighting it out. You have Netflix versus Amazon Prime, and then you have Disney and their cabal of Hulu and ESPN Plus going against HBO Max, and they're being joined by Peacock, which is NBC Universal, and Paramount Plus, which is CBS Viacom. So those are the major players in the game. Then there's a whole bunch of sub tiers after that. The next tier below is things like Shudder for horror aficionados, and I think Criterion, even though it is sort of attached to HBO Max as an independent service, Criterion is basically the creme de la creme of movies from the last 80 years. Are eventually on that streaming service.
Well, actually, can I interrupt you about Criterion? I remember this is years ago, there was a film I was trying to find. It was filmed in the 90s, and I was, I think it was about the conflict going on in the Balkans. and you said, "Oh, it was Criterion. That means it must be good." Do you want to just give it just a brief, and then go back to the streaming thing? What
Yeah.
Criterion is?
So I don't remember the origin stories of Criterion, but basically it was a film society that dedicated itself to preserving film. Ted Warner, Ted Turner,
Ted Turner. Ted Turner.
Ted Turner invested some money in it. Scorsese invested some money in it, and a lot of other high-profile directors
And
at
you
the time.
and you can tell if a film is Criterion, like you and IMDb, and they have like a certification or some sort of
Yeah,
thing.
usually the box the cover to the DVD or Blu-ray would have a C in the corner. It's typically
It's kind of
Criterion.
small. It's like you got to look for it, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you got to look for it. But for the time, it started out as a preservation society. But obviously, when you only have so much money to go for, you're going to preserve the best films. And so, all of the Kurosawa filmography is in the Criterion collection. I think right now they're up about 14 or 1500 movies in their classification, and
Okay.
basically they would preserve the film. They would take the best copy of a particular film and translate it to the best media of the day.
They would digitize it so it would be preserved forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the 2K and the 4K upgrades were, more digitization.
Yeah.
But the
They were going to make sure it doesn't turn into silver nitrate explosion. Anyway.
exactly. But they would also, if they were significant enough films like Red Rust or whatever, they would actually put together booklets of extra things from the movie, like behind the scenes photography or essays written on a particular film, or in some cases,
Interviews with the directors and the
interviews with the
actors.
directors. They put a lot of time and effort into a lot of their releases, except for Blue is the Warmest Color. I still don't understand why we didn't get the uncut version of that, but
Okay,
that's
well,
besides the point.
that's yeah. But anyway,
Um,
back to the streaming thing.
but back to the streaming service. So basically, you have a big war at the top, okay, and then you have a lot of niche services like Shudder and Criterion and Crunchyroll. They know what their niche is and they're going to stay there. And then there's everything else, like Pluto TV. They're basically a whole crap ton of ads, but they're free. Uh, those are the people that are going, hey, if we bombard you with 20 minutes of ads, you'll watch this 30-minute show. Sort of like the YouTube model, except less egregious. Um, but at the top, you have basically the five major studios, with the exception of, four of the five major studios. Sony is setting this out. But Paramount has their own streaming service. Warner Brothers has their streaming service with HBO Max. Disney has their streaming service. Fox is part of Disney now. That was the fourth one. But Sony is setting this streaming wars business out. They realize that the money is in licensing, not in having a streaming service.
Yeah, well, there
But
was an argument made about what was the movie that Amazon, or the series Amazon just came out with, where they were saying it's going to bankrupt the fucking company.
the Rings of Power.
Yeah, like apparently, like they put a.
They spent $1 billion for like 20 pages of material, and they owe 50 hours of content.
Yeah, and apparently, like that's not, as far as shareholder. I'm not looking at this from an artistic point of view per se, but the model for streaming is different than the model for theater releases.
Yes,
so.
indeed. And that this is going to lose Amazon a lot of money. The only problem is Amazon has a lot of money to lose. Uh,
True. Yeah.
um, I think the only company with deeper pockets than Amazon right now is Apple. Apple
Yeah.
does have a streaming service, but they're not as invested in being number one like everyone else is. I think they're biding their time until they find someone to buy.
Right. They'll let everybody fight it out and just let them kill each other, and then they'll step in. Possibly.
Right.
Possibly. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. I want to. Well, first off, thank you, Mike, for being on. But also, I want you to like. Do you have a media profile like where people can follow you? If you don't, that's fine. Do you have something like where people could?
I'm only a lurker on the social media platforms. I don't actually post anywhere, so my digital footprint is fairly minimal.
Okay, fair enough. That's totally cool. And any advice you would give to, because there are some young bloods that do watch my stream, Zoomers and early millennials. Any advice you would give them about movies or the appreciation thereof?
Well, I found that it's very hard to tell a person what a good movie is. I can tell them what I think a good movie is, but until you've watched X number of hours of movies, you don't know what your tastes are. Because
Mm.
your taste may be wholly different than mine. As we discovered here, I liked The Irishman a little more than our host had. Okay, but yeah, but we have slightly different tastes to where I appreciated the film more than he did. Um, by the same token, I appreciated some of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and I thought others were utter garbage. Uh, and there are some people that are MCU fanboys, left, right, and center, and there are people that it's Zack Snyder's Superman or nothing. Uh, until you watch the body of film to figure out what your tastes are, you may like Adam Sandler comedies. You might like Tyler Perry films. And more power to you. They need an audience too.
Mm. Mm.
I can only tell you what I think are good films or what I think are good ways to appreciate film.
Okay, well, I'm going to end this with one last question for Michael. If you have to see only one movie, I know that I'm setting you up, brother. I know it. If you have to see only one movie, what should it be?
Oh, hell.
I stumped him.
No, I think the best movie set up like that. Ooh, I'm sorry, but I'm probably going to have to point you at, um, yeah,
What?
on the waterfront, maybe.
Oh, on the Marlon Brando on the waterfront. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much anything Brando's been in before he went mental.
Yeah, pretty okay. Well, as Quentin Tarantino said, there are two types of films: movies that were made before Marlon Brando and movies that were made after Marlon Brando. And if I was asked that question, I would say Casablanca, but that's just me. And Mike knows far more about film than I do. Anyway, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciated being able to pick your brain, and hopefully our audience did as well. And that is all for this evening. Everybody, thank you so much. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you got questions for me or Mike, well, you can put them for Mike, and I'll just forward them to him. And I'll if he responds, I'll answer back. But if But anyway, thank you, everybody, and good evening. Good night.
Yeah, if you leave a comment, I will respond to questions on this particular chat. Thanks for having me.
All right. You're so welcome, brother.